Greetings, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be back in conversation with my dear brother, Keone Hanalei, who all of you know well by this point. But just to remind you, Keone is a descendant of the Mu people, an ancient Hawaiian lineage and holder of pre-flood ancient knowledge, which is going to be very important in our conversation today. He's also the founder of Pohala, Esoteric Hawaiian Botanical Medicines, which I must say are extraordinary. I've been enjoying using them. And he's a wisdom teacher, an alchemist, and bringing bring your truth and healing energy into this critical time that we're in on the planet, Keone. So thank you for being back in conversation again.
Thank you, Mahalo. Thank you, Heather, and thank you to the audience. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share some more of my Ike, my knowledge, and of course, the information that I retrieve from my lineage and my culture, my Mu Hawaiian culture. And always a joy to be in conversation with you, Heather. And you and I have become really close friends since I don't know when our first conversation was. But over the years, to cultivate a friendship with you, Heather, has just been so wonderful for me. So mahalo.
Mm, it's such an honor for me, dear brother. So today we're going to talk about Atlantis and what happened around the fall of Atlantis, approximately 12,000 years ago, how it resonates with what we're facing and some of the critical issues of this time, and how we can work that consciously to be in a quantum leap in terms of our consciousness. So let's dive in.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right, Heather? Where did we begin? Well, I feel like just to address that, in my own private conversations with many people and the way that we perceive the world to be functioning right now and unfolding is a lot of people keep saying that it seems like we're repeating an Atlantean timeline. That seems to be the theme, and it keeps coming up. And so perhaps there's some truth to that, is that we are in this cycle where we're repeating an Atlantean timeline. And so maybe even addressing some of the qualities uh, that determine what this Atlantean timeline was all about, so that we can maybe even reconsider how we want to make a reapproach. Because for me, if something is repeating itself, it likely means that it's incomplete. And so rather than allow it to overpower us and then we just succumb to it once again, perhaps we can refine our memory of it so that we can participate in refining and then completing it. And so I feel like this is so fun ultimately because so many of us, we do have these memories of Atlantis. And we're in this coming into like this Aquarian age, right? Where one of the great things I love about Aquarius energy is that it can be very intellectual because it's an air sign, which means that there's fair distribution that's accessible to all of us. For me, one of the ways that I translate fair distribution is we all get to share notes. And so taking the authority out of maybe just a chosen few or the authority of one person, and we're now distributing it. And so it is a time for all of us to begin to speak and share and share notes.
Beautifully said, because it is so about being in community and collaborating to co-create this future together. And I think part of what you said that's so important, Keone, is that we have, and part of my research with the processional cycle is that we have historically been in these times of major crisis on the planet every 12,000 years. And the fall of Atlantis came approximately 9,600 BCE in the time of the Younger Dryas crisis, when we had cataclysmic floods on the planet. So I think we hold that, and you're going to get more into this because you so carry that wisdom from your lineage. But I think we all have that cellular memory of that crisis 12,000 years ago. and that we're back in that window now. But for me, it, like you said, it doesn't mean we have to repeat the past. We actually have this opportunity for an evolutionary leap
Yeah.
into a whole new way of being, but we have to heal and learn from the lessons of that crisis 12,000 years ago.
Yes, yes. And I love that, Heather, because I feel like the best way to describe what you just shared is a proper integration. And so it feels like we've been maybe repelling something and rather than properly integrating it. And the fact that we're now coming into this potentially repeating of the cycle is an opportunity for us to properly integrate it so that we can refine, refresh, and then come into what we're destined to come into, which, maybe that will be part of the theme of the conversation today. Just to share with the audience, and maybe this would be a cliffhanger, and we'll come back to it, Heather, but one thing that I really love about the explosion of artificial intelligence is that it's asking all of humanity to confirm or to consider what exactly is love. What does it mean to be a human being? And that is the big question as artificial intelligence begins to, overwhelm the collective is we're now questioning that. Like, what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be in love? And so perhaps that's part of the true integration that we're in is to confirm that, consider that, and then maybe, to express that, to confirm, yeah, to experience, to express that. So once again, coming back into recognition of what does it mean to be a human being? And then what does it mean to be a human being in love?
That feels so important. And let's keep coming back to that theme, Keone, because so many, I mean, you often refer to Blavatsky's work, and she and Edgar Casey and others talked about some of the decline of Atlantis that led to its fall was they're getting caught in materialism, in corruption, in idealization of the mind and technology. And we're in danger of following that path now. And
Mhm.
then we're repeating those patterns of the past instead of healing from it and moving into a new integration and way of being. We could, in fact, repeat that trauma from the past. And we are getting more and more caught in that's the shadow side of the age of Aquarius is getting caught in technology, in artificial intelligence, and losing that understanding of love and the capacity of our consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a story of outsourcing. And that's why reconsidering what it means to be a human being is, of course, coming back into the perception and the elegance of the human being, the capacity and the capabilities of the human being, of human agency. Therefore, no longer outsourcing oneself. Heather, I have some things I can share about what the ferns have been sharing with me because I know you're familiar and maybe the audience is familiar that really the foundation of like my body of work is something called Pua Ehu Ehu. It's fern medicine. And so I have this ability to communicate with the ferns, who are, of course, one of the most primordial, archaic species on our planet. And so they hold so much knowledge and wisdom. And I'd love to share a little bit about what the ferns have been sharing with me about our current time.
Please, that would be wonderful.
Mahalo. So, one thing I do want to preface about the really sophistication of ferns is that they are thought and known or remembered to be the only species on our planet to have attained what is known as evolutionary stasis. Evolutionary stasis means that they've completely evolved. And the important thing about that is if you've completely evolved, we're no longer required to take in any more data. You and I, as evolving human beings, we're taking a lot of data and we're responsible for filtering and purifying all of this data. And along the way, there's a potential of us to become corrupted or to become disorganized. Whereas the ferns, because they've attained evolutionary stasis, they don't need to take in any data. So everything they hold in their sphere of awareness is pure, it's uncorruptible. And so when I have communications with the ferns, I know it's coming from a place that is uncorrupted. The ferns are currently expressing this very unique feature called a fern spike. Now, a fern spike is historical. If we go into the topography of our planet, we'll notice that certain layers at certain times, there's a huge number of ferns, fossilized ferns. In fact, they would dominate this layer of topography. The cataclysmic event that you shared about the Younger Dryas is an example. We see that there was a large amount of ferns that dominated their space. This is due in part too because ferns are the ultimate survivors. And so if there's a cataclysmic event or if there's an extinction event, the ferns will rejuvenate themselves rather quickly. And that's why they would dominate an entire space. And we see layers of just ferns. We'll know that that would suggest it was a cataclysmic event and an extinction event. Well, today, we're not needing to read the actual topography of the surface of our planet right now. We know that the ferns are in this thing called a fern spike because their spores are just prolific right now. They're re expressing themselves prolifically right now. I've had so many conversations with people who share that they see ferns popping up everywhere in large amount of numbers. Heather, have you noticed lots of ferns just popping up?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And I keep getting this. It's like, oh my gosh, ferns that I didn't think could grow here are growing here now. They're in all these inconspicuous places or maybe even inhospitable places. Well, it's likely because there's a fern spike where the spores are being released in large amounts. And then, of course, spores are airborne. And so they're propagating themselves all over. So we can identify that this is an actual current fern spike that's happening. Now, remember what I shared about when we read the topography of the planet, that would suggest that we're in an extinction event or a cataclysm. The fact that the ferns are expressing themselves in this way right now actually suggests that we're currently in a cataclysm. And when we talk about cataclysms, I know many people were waiting for a dramatic event to occur, such as an asteroid hit or a supervolcano. And so we're not really aware that a cataclysm is not always a production. It can also be something subtle and or it can be something synthetic. Because what seems to be happening too with the release of the spores in these large amounts, sister, this is one of the ways that I'm reasoning with it, is that they may be also attempting to neutralize something else that's airborne.
Wow.
Right,
What you mean
right.
by a synthetic
Yeah.
crisis?
Yes. And so the EMFs, perhaps, but they're attempting to neutralize something that is also airborne, which is likely the surge of artificial intelligence, which we know it has a lot to do with the EMFs and a lot of what is occurring as far as the distortion of even our atmosphere, because we really don't know the consequences of what is happening right now. And, the ferns come from a place of ultimate devotion to our planet. Of course, I feel devotion and solidarity with everything on the planet, but ultimately to the planet. And so for them to be doing this in such a dramatic way could suggest, one, we're in a cataclysm right now, and two, they're attempting to neutralize something else that's airborne.
Do you think, Keone, it has anything to do also with you and I were talking earlier about how EMFs and Ibrahim Karim and other scientists talk about this has such a dehydrating effect on the planet? And that in relationship also with some of the geomagnetic storms that we've been having that are electrifying the planet. It's creating so much dehydration. But
Yeah.
also, as I was saying to you before we got on, Elizabeth Sahtouris, the evolution biologist, said that a lot of the human effects on the planet across these last few thousand years have been about the desertification of the planet. We're drying the planet out. But it seems like the EMFs are really accelerating that process.
Right, right. And to that piece of dehydration as well, I'd love to share. a specific fern that is wanting to communicate with us. There's a fern called Kihi. Its scientific name is Adenophorus periens, and that scientific name is going to be a code that we get to decipher to really understand or grasp what is happening on the planet right now. But Kihi, this fern called Kihi, which is a Hawaiian fern, was just 5 years ago believed to be extinct. And then it just started popping up and not popping up in a lab. It wasn't being propagated by synthetic forms, just in nature. It just started popping up mysteriously after being believed to have been extinct. And now, I can go on an adventure in the forest here on Maui, and I will likely bump into Kihi fern. That's how much it's propagating, proliferating right now. And so the code of this fern clearly wants to share something with us. So with Pua Ehu Ehu fern medicine, there are 103 ferns that correlate to 103 human emotions. And so Kihi represents a very specific emotion. It's holding in its spores an emotion that is to be preserved. Remember, the ferns, they don't take in data. So whatever they hold, they're preserving. And, that's an important piece because now that it's resurging itself, that code that it holds wants to be expressed. It's a message to us. So Kihi holds the code of emotional pandemonium. Now, pandemonium, and of course, pandemonium is a more modern word. It's one of the best ways that we can translate it from our language into like a modern way. That's the closest pandemonium. The energy of pandemonium is that of a quantum leap. It's an irreversible shift, and sometimes a destructive, irreversible shift. When we go into a quantum leap, we can never return to that which was before. And so the presence of Kihi Fern right now is suggesting that we are currently in a quantum leap. Okay, so that's a clue right there. It's like, wow. Now, what is the quantum leap? What is this cataclysmic event? Okay, now let's take the scientific name for Kihi, Adenophorus periens, because the way that the sophistication of names, at least in Hawaiian culture, is if we ever come into amnesia, whatever our name is the reconciliation of amnesia. So our names hold the code. And sometimes when I have this conversation with people, they're like, oh, yeah, but I was named after a movie star, or I was named after this. I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's how your name had to greet you.
Mm.
Right. And so even the scientific name was purposeful because it holds the code of what perhaps we're experiencing in this quantum leap. Adenophorus periens literally means the glands perish. The glands perish. So humans, our glands are what secrete liquids. We have the pineal and the pituitary. They secrete, right, melatonin. They secrete the milk and the honey substance. And we have the gonads, which are our sexual organs. So fertility. And so there's a couple things we're working with right now. One is that Kihi may be suggesting that the quantum leap is an end to fertility or infertility. But it can also mean that some liquids are being extracted from us. And so we're in a process of dehydration. The human being is in a process of dehydration. I want to go further into this and even maybe find a diplomatic path here because that which is being extracted from us may not be bad. There may be something that must become extracted from us. And that is why we're in a process of dehydration. And even on the macro level, the planet, maybe something needs to be extracted. I'm speaking into this because perhaps that which needs to be extracted is inauthenticity. Inauthenticity an example of that would be whatever is artificial. And so perhaps we're in this mutation, human beings are in this mutation where the first step or the first protocol is a process of dehydration in order to extract that which is inauthentic.
So it's almost like a transformational process, an alchemical process, that something needs to die off for us to birth ourselves anew, or that it's this wake-up call, really pushing us to look at what we're doing to ourselves and what we're doing to the planet.
Right, sister. And that's one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum, of course, is uh that the dehydration that we're going through is a result of the surge of the synthetics that is, I would say, a depreciating human agency. And so there's many ways that we can view this. And I'm wanting to bring out all the potential possibilities so that we can all come to our own understanding or memory of exactly what is happening when we have this cataclysmic event. And then we have a code from Fern that is pristine, and it's saying that it's the end or the perishing of the glands, or, right, a process of dehydration. And so offering just full allowance for all of us to come to terms with exactly what does that mean.
Do you think, Keone, it is really showing us, and I want to circle back to what you've said to me before about this new understanding of primitive artificial.
Yeah.
But do you think if you think about dehydration and you realize that water is the source of all of life, and water, as we increasingly know, holds consciousness, holds the memories of who we are. And Aquarius, it may be an air sign, but its symbol is the ancient symbol for the living waters. So it's as if we're being led to this crisis point to realize we're on a path of dehydration. We're on a path of really losing the very life force within us to awaken us to this quantum leap, to reclaim. I see Aquarius as not only the living waters that are the source of our life on the planet, but the living energies of the cosmos, the
Mhm.
living wisdom of the cosmos that is there to guide us into this evolutionary leap that we're capable of.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in the Mu doctrines, our ancestors, our founders, are plasmic beings. And of course, plasma and water are just so synonymous with one another, but it's the plasmic beings that cultivated the atmosphere of our planet and then also the magnetic field so that organic life could live. And so it truly is the genesis of you and I is water. It's water. And so perhaps just as you're sharing, right, that we're in this even mutation with our relationship with water, this choice point of what we want to do with our relationship with water. We can perceive to feel that the machines don't necessarily value water the way that organic human beings or organic life values water. And so, yes, I definitely feel that we're also being asked to reconsider our relationship with water, and that will determine where we go.
Can you say more about that phrase, primitive artificial, and what that means in your?
Yes. So, you're speaking into this timeline of Atlantis being about 12,000 years ago. Well, something interesting. I have access to something called the Olihelu. It's a genealogical chant, and every Hawaiian has a genealogical chant. I believe that not all Hawaiians remember it, but every Hawaiian has a genealogical chant. And we come from a culture that had no written language. And feel into this for a moment, especially talking about human agency, is that we didn't need to write things down. We didn't need to document things because we had a human agency. And so human agency, an example is clairvoyance, clairsentience, telepathy, psychic abilities, all of that. And so there's no need to use a third party. And so we would be able to code our history and not just our own genetic history, but the history of the cosmos. And one of the beautiful ways to which we did that is by chant. and it's a genealogical chant. And in the genealogical chant of my own family and in some of the other Hawaiian and Miu families, there's this mention of something called ku'i makumua. And the best way to translate what ku'i makumua means is primitive artificial. This is a little striking because this means that in the timeline to which you're speaking of, 12,000 years ago, artificial is being mentioned. Artificial is mentioned, right? We perceive that the technological world that we exist in right now is something completely new that we've just sort of like begin to refine in the lifetimes of the modern world when it's mentioned 12,000 years ago, which could also suggest that we are indeed repeating that cycle. And the reference to Ku'i Makumua, it's saying that artificial is what creates something as rudimentary. Because artificial, if we are resourcing or relying on that which is artificial, we are being distracted of human agency. And so we're all being distracted. And that's why in the beginning of this conversation, I said the great thing about artificial intelligence is it's asking us, what is a human being? If you want to differentiate, sure. What exactly is a human being? Because I feel like when we press ourselves to address that, we'll begin to uncover human agency. You know, Greg Braden wrote this book called Pure Human. So good. So good. Like, talk about a champion of the organic human, right? It's like, yes, thank you, Greg Braden. But talking about, right, the sophistication of the cosmic technology that is human agency. And so in 12,000 BC, this was discussed as the artificial takes us away from human agency, which makes us rudimentary or primitive. It's human agency that allows us to be so advanced.
Beautifully said, Keone. And part of what Greg Braden talks about in that book is that the capacity of our human consciousness is so far beyond anything that we could do with artificial intelligence. And that going down that path would not only distract us, but diminish us from this opportunity to reclaim what we're capable of with our consciousness. And it seems, and you have this wisdom coming from your lineage, but my understanding is that part of what happened with Atlantis that led to its fall was its over idealization of the mind and of technology and that abuse of power and effort to have control versus what you're talking about with living from the heart, living from love, living from being in harmony with all that is, and that human agency that is about being in right relationship with the life around us.
Yes, yes. Human agency is holistic. And the definition of holistic is no one part is explicable without referencing the whole. And so the mind is a great thing, but so is the heart. And so ensuring that they're working in tandem, no one part is explicable without referencing the whole. With the artificial intelligence explosion right now, we're predominantly in the mind. And so the heart is being dismissed in a way, and as a result, we are being distracted of human agency. So everything that we're speaking into, clairvoyance, clairsentience, all of this. And I'm so glad, Heather. One, I'm so glad that it's still a current conversation, right? We can still just casually even talk about clairvoyance, clairsentience, and it's acceptable. But part two is oftentimes it's deemed as fantastical. And that's the unfortunate part. Because I love to remind everyone it's real. It's real, right? And the more that we can relax into it, the more we can access it, resource it, and then no longer outsource ourselves. And so, what I want to address too about the heart and the mind in this holistic self that is the organic human being is that heart for me is electrical. It's electrical. The base composite of our entire universe is just that. This is an electrical universe, and so it's constant. And so when we're heart-centered or we're in heart resonance, we're in the field of that which is constant. Some people call this flow state. It's affluence. It's to be in the flow. And so ensuring that we're in heart resonance means that we're basically in the grid. We're in the grid and we're being supported as much as we contribute to the grid. That's heart resonance. One thing that I know about heart resonance that I could translate as an experience that I have with heart resonance is it's the hub of contentment.
Mm,
Contentment.
mm,
Okay. The important thing about contentment is, Heather, this is where we really become present,
mm,
is in contentment. That's heart resonance. We can feel that the mind or the artificial intelligence were not content. That's the purpose of artificial intelligence, at least that to which I've been observing, is that artificial intelligence is being created because there's discontent. We want more, or we're inconvenienced. And therefore, we're not in heart resonance, we're not content, which means we may not be present. So, the mind, and this is one of the beautiful things about the mind, of course, because the holistic, we must also honor the mind in tandem with the heart. But the mind is all about magnetism. It is all about electrical constants of electricity, magnetism. Now, magnetism, it's how we inflate or deflate. One of the ways to which I want to share it like this about the mechanics of the mind and with magnetism is notice the actual function and behavior of a magnet. It repels its like. Okay, that's kind of important because it's repelling that contentment. But there's a reason why it does that because it's attracting its opposite. We can translate that as it loves problems. It loves problems because magnetism, when it attracts its opposite, it loves to cultivate solutions. And so when we're predominantly in the mind, we're always looking for problems so that we can cultivate and execute solutions. Of course, the problem therein, that's a pun, by the way. The problem therein is that if we're content, there's really no problem. But if we're in the mind, we're going to actually look for or create problems so we can feed the magnetism of the mind, which wants to create and execute solutions.
Do you think that's so powerful, Keone? And do you think it's also that the mind longs for control, where the heart is all about being in the present moment and being in relationship?
Mhm,
And so the mind is also always caught in the realm of duality and
mhm.
polarization, where it's only through the heart that we can open to unity consciousness and come into that peace and contentment that is the remembrance that we're part of the oneness of all that is.
Yeah, sister. And yes, with the mind, really, really valuing control because it's also rational because if I have a hypothesis, I need to test the hypothesis. And so I need to predict. And that, that's one of the fast tracks into control is this need to predict, which brings us into this fascination with control. And one thing I want to share too in correlation with the mind, because it's commonly attributed with or because of patriarchy. Sure. So patriarchy, like all things in the universe, it has a purpose. It has a purpose. The key, right, is for us to know when the purpose is complete. So the purpose of patriarchy, now I'm retrieving my own memory, but I'm also retrieving what I can find in the Holy Helu, in the doctrines, okay, of my genealogy and of my culture, of New Hawaiian culture. And patriarchy was designed because we needed to recover from a crisis. And that's the purpose of patriarchy. It's to recover from a crisis. And feel it like this too. When we're recovering from a crisis, it's no longer about quality. We're just accessing the bare minimum. That's what happens when we're in a true crisis. We don't have the care to discern, which is very feminine, to observe, to distribute. In a crisis, we must reach for the bare minimum because we need to cultivate a solution right now. And so, what this could have been a result of is the aftermath of a cataclysm to where we were legitimately in a crisis. But what happened is no longer in that crisis. And that's patriarchy, is when we forget that we're no longer in a crisis, we may come back to heart resonance and come back into contentment, be present once again with that to which we are in experience with right now. Rather, with patriarchy, it's always in the mind. And as a result, right, cultivate these theories in order to alleviate a crisis. It also needs to predict. It has to predict because it has an objective. And as a result, it does come into the control paradigm. But the key is, right, Heather, and this is something that all humanity can once again honor. I'm not in a crisis right now. That's one way to we can come into the abdication of patriarchy is once again coming into heart resonance because it does share with us what can we be content about so we can come into once again presence. Remember with the mind and especially with artificial intelligence, I don't believe anyone when they say that we're doing this artificial intelligence because we need to out of necessity. I don't believe that. I believe it's for the purpose of making our lives more convenient because we believe ourselves to be in catastrophic inconvenience. But when I come back into heart resonance, I don't believe that. There's so much for us to be grateful for. There's so much for us to be in relationship with right now that I don't need to always eject heart resonance and then come predominantly into the mind.
So you're in essence saying that movement into patriarchy, which really got activated about 3000 BCE, was a survival mentality following a crisis.
Right.
And interestingly enough, Keone, there is increasing evidence that there was some comet strikes and some major earth changes and a climate crisis at that time that is what led to this shift into these nomadic cultures that started honoring the sky gods and moving us into the patriarchal paradigms. So, what you're saying is then we've gotten so enamored with the survival mentality, we've forgotten how to come back into living and being in our true full selves as human beings and coming back to our hearts and coming back into harmony and right relationship. We're still caught in this fear-based survival mentality.
Yeah, you do so well with doing an assessment on what I share, Heather. Thank you so much. Yes, that's it. That's it. And I love to also, for me in my own relationship with patriarchy, part of the abdication process is to thank it and say like, okay, I'm not in crisis. Thank you so much. I now integrate it. It is complete. Patriarchy is complete within my own life. And so the more and more of us who can really honor that, do a proper completion of the patriarchal paradigm within ourselves, which is coming out of fear-based, allowing ourselves to relax more into the heart, coming into deeper states of contentment, not being, I would say, swayed or indoctrinated by this idea that inconvenience and discomfort somehow creates a crisis. You and I, we live in a world that is likely comprised of something known as contrast. Contrast is all about variation, which means there will always be levels of discomfort and inconvenience. That doesn't make it a crisis. It's as if we're feeding patriarchy. It doesn't know how to loosen its grip because we're demanding of it. We're saying, no, I'm still in the crisis. Nope, nope, nope. And patriarchy is still holding on until we can permit it to be released by one, recognizing what is occurring in our life right now, what we can be appreciative of, and then dropping back into heart resonance. Because in a way, we're also individually rescuing the patriarchy within all of us because it's just being informed to function in a certain way. We're not being victimized by it. At least that's my perception. No one is being victimized by it. It needs a leader. It needs a leader. And for you and I to come into heart resonance, that can be the proper leader so that we can come out of non-essential crisis, which is fueling transhumanism.
So this is a critical choice point, and so much of the age of Aquarius is about leaving those power over hierarchical, patriarchal paradigms behind. And I love what you're saying, Keone, about honoring what we got from that, but now seeing the shadow aspects of it so that we can move into these new paradigms that are about community, collaboration, and the sovereignty of the self to reclaim our living from our hearts and in that right relationship with all that is. But it also, as you said, means reclaiming our capacity of our consciousness to be clairvoyant, clairaudient, to reclaim those psychic gifts that existed before written language because written language wasn't needed in those ancient cultures. That's your lineage. And we're having this opportunity now to move into this quantum leap, as you said.
Yeah, sister, yes. And so even like coming back to the conversation of dehydration, sometimes it's to extract something from us, and perhaps that's patriarchy. Maybe the invitation is saying, look, there's this also medicine for us to extract patriarchy from us because Heather, I have a deep sense and a deep knowing that this transhumanistic idea can only exist within patriarchy. It can only exist within patriarchy. When we drop back into heart resonance, it's not as if we're going to dismiss it, it's just not needed. It's not essential. One of the things about the mind, right? When we come into the mind, we come into excess. Because remember, the mind is constantly looking for problems because it just really loves solutions. It's ultimately not malicious, right? It's like, I'm so good at solutions. So let's create a problem today. And I don't know about you, Heather, but like I kind of like tested it out. I was like, this was maybe a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I was feeling so content. I was just sitting. I was had on my property. I have a fire pit, and I was doing a fire, and I was, just communing. And I was like, "Oh, wow! I feel so content." But the mind came in and said, "Come on, there's got to be something. There's got to be something we need to worry about, right?" And I just ended up laughing and laughing because I'm like, "Wow, that's the mind." Just eagerly wanting a problem because it loves solutions. And the reason why I feel like this is so important to discuss in tandem and relation to the transhumanistic explosion right now is because with transhumanism or with artificial intelligence, we're truly translating inconvenience as a crisis. Because that's the only, for me, if I look and look and look, I'm like, why is this thing even existing to begin with? It's because we've perceived that inconvenience is such a problem that we have to institute these things of convenience. That's the only reason. And that's why satiating the mind of having to look for problems drop us back into heart resonance, where when we want to utilize the mind, of course we can, but it's going to be non-essential and not for excess.
For excess, or as you were saying earlier, survival mentality, because I also see that movement towards transhumanism as a survival-based mentality of this is how we prolong our mortality. This is how we exist when we're in climate crisis, when we're dealing with the external crises that surround us. But it's creating more of the very problem that we're trying to clear and release. And what you're saying is when we come back to the heart and come back to that resonance, that contentment, that peace, that remembrance that we're a part of the oneness, then the healing can happen that allows us to move into this radically new way of being in which we actually thrive. We're no longer in survival mentality and caught in fear. We actually then thrive. And this is the meaning, from my perspective, of the fact that we're moving out of the Kali Yuga, that this time of patriarchy has been a time of survival mentality, has been fear based, has been in our processional cycle the time of the lowest level of consciousness. And now we have this opportunity to remember who we truly are, what we're capable of, come back into the amazing capacity we have as humans to be back in contentment, in peace, in stillness, in oneness, in love. And
Yeah.
this is the quantum leap that we're capable of. And it's interesting, Keone, that I mentioned to you before we got on the recording that I've been looking at that asteroid that's symbolic of Atlantis.
Mm.
And it's been at 27 degrees of Libra, exactly opposite Chiron at 27 degrees of Aries. And it's been squaring our last full moon, squaring the new moon today. It
Wow.
feels as if you listen to the ferns and I listen to the planets and the stars, and it's as if it's saying, heal those wounds from the time of Atlantis, heal those wounds from the age of Aries, and move into what we're capable of with higher consciousness. And here's the amazing thing, Keone. I looked up today what is the meaning of the Sabian symbol for 27 degrees of Libra, which is where that asteroid for Atlantis is now. And it is about becoming aware of spiritual forces surrounding and assisting us, the realization that we are not alone, but we are part of a visible and invisible spiritual community guiding us.
Mm. That's so beautiful. That's exquisite, Heather. And yeah, with that Atlantis, this is that comet or asteroid, sister?
Asteroid.
Yeah, this asteroid that is putting into view, right, that we are at this choice point, that we're at this quantum leap right now where we can choose the path of something that we've already done, or we can integrate it and complete it properly so that we can come into that to which we're destined to evolve as. And with accessing and resourcing human agency, once again, reuniting with human agency and celebrating human agency. Because ultimately, Heather, I feel like this universe, this is just me, but this universe, it's ready for a completion. It's ready for a completion. You know how some people will say, like, Earth, we feel like we're being observed. Yeah, I feel that. Right. And then, right, then we can go into narratives like, oh, because we're so special. Sure, we are, of course, but not as special, right, as anything and everything else within this universe. But what it could suggest is that Earth is the final frontier. It's the final frontier. And based upon what we decide to do, we'll either replicate an antiquated cycle or bring this universe into completion. And that's why I do feel like we're being observed and not observed in a way where, right, we're being scrutinized or being judged, but we're being celebrated. Everything in the universe is saying, come on, humans. Yeah, it's all come to this place, right? And so can we? And I believe that one way to which we can complete this universe is to complete ourselves, right? The macro to the micro. And that's why when I shared, like, it's time, the AI are present right now because they're as curious with us as we could be with ourselves and say, like, what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a human being with a potential of love? What exactly is that? I feel like when we address that and then experience that by way of integrating it as something that is being experienced in real time, right now, not an objective, but right now, that will be part of the process of the completion of the organic human, and then the completion of the planet, and the completion of an entire universe.
So it's all about love.
Yeah, yeah.
The realization that that is our nature as human beings coming from the heart, that that is the energy that moves through the cosmos, that that is, from my perspective, the living energies being poured to the earth by the stars of Aquarius, saying, come back into drinking deeply of the energies of the cosmos, which are the energies of love.
I love that, sister. And especially when you said drink deeply, it's like, right, maybe the dehydration is because we've been drinking or ingesting something that is not for the in the favor of the completion of the universe. And so the expelling of that first so that we are purified, so that we can drink deeply, just as you share of likely love, to drink deeply of love.
And then we're really honoring the true meaning of apocalypse, which is not cataclysm, it's the great revealing, it's the unveiling, it's the remembering of who we actually are.
Mhm. Mhm.
Is there other guidance from the ferns, Keone, in how we can be in that awakening?
I want to share this about the ferns because, of course, the ferns share something about love. Um, So, those of you who aren't familiar with Po'a fern medicine, it's all about human emotions, and that there are 103 ferns that correlate to 103 human emotions. Just like Kihi represents pandemonium, which is in fact emotion because it's very electrical. It's a stimulant. You and I, as human beings, that's how we experience an electrical universe is by way of our emotions. It's how we generate electricity within our organic body is our emotions. So the common question I get, Heather, is what's the fern of love? Yeah, that was like, that would have been my question too. Is like, okay, all the emotions, like let's fast track love. I want to play with the fern of love. So there is no fern of love. There's no one fern of love because love is the culmination of all human emotions. Now, the power of love, Heather. Ooh, this is so good, sis. The power of love is so colossal that a world of form cannot hold it.
Hmm.
It will collapse this world. That's what we want. That's called a completion. And so allowing ourselves to come into fluency of all human emotions, which means our experiential and sensational experience here in electrical world, to allow it, which will take us to the fulfillment of love, which will be so colossal that it will collapse this world. It's called transmutation, transfiguration. And what I feel awaits us from that point of transfiguration is the next universe. And in the Mu doctrines, we are living in a legacy of a succession of universes. Every universe has a base composite and then it has its destiny. For Earth, and this is in the Mu doctrines, for this universe and Earth within this universe, the base composite is electricity. It's the base composite. And one of the features, of course, of electricity in this universe is plasma. It's plasma. But our destiny is something known as love. And so once we attain that love, we accomplish that love, it gets transferred into the next universe, which means the next universe, its base composite will be love, which means that it will create something from love. Can you just imagine, sis? What is that, right? To create something from love, but we must transfer it. We must complete this universe to transfer it into the next universe, and we become those ambassadors of love. And the next universe is because we properly transferred love.
Wow. That is so incredible to contemplate. And it sounds like part of what you're saying, Keone, is to get there, to bring about this completion, is about allowing,
Mm.
is about opening to that full spectrum of our emotions and holding it in acceptance, being with it in presence, being in the present moment, but being present with all that is.
Yes. With that heart resonance, right? And that which is constant, the electricity that is constant, which means in presence, we're in the grid. And not that we're never in the grid, we're always in the grid, but we are recognizing that we're in the grid, which means that sense of separation has been resolved. And then from there, right, then we can come into collaboration of the completion of this universe. And you know what I love about being in the heart resonance of the grid? So my elders, my Hawaiian elders, they said that there's only one requirement for a kahuna, a makaula, a mystic, a witch, a warlock. There's only one requirement, and that's you must levitate. You must levitate. And it's speaking about being in the grid. Because when we're in the grid, Heather, in presence, we're really held. You know, the mind, it doesn't feel held. It wants to create problems to cultivate solutions because it doesn't know that it's being held. When we're in the heart, we know we're being held. We relax. That's levitation. We're in exquisite levitation.
So it's all about leaving behind that illusion of separation, reclaiming that awareness that we're held, we're loved, we're supported, we're a part of the oneness and have always been a part of the oneness of all that is.
Yeah, and for me, the process of coming into that recognition is coming into deeper states of contentment. And this can be something for anyone in the audience, whatever allows you to be present. For me, it's contentment. And that's why I truly feel like heart resonance, it has that exquisite code of contentment. But whatever brings you into presence, you'll begin to feel the grid. And then, thus, all the non-essential problems that the mind festers off of will no longer be important or interesting. That's the key. It's not to dismiss it altogether because we cannot dismiss the mind. It's purposeful, but we can know when it is resource and when we can relax into the heart. And so, whatever that takes for anyone to come into presence, that is the invitation. And thus, we begin to also extract and resource human agency, which then, in a way, disqualifies anything synthetic. It just will spontaneously and immediately disqualify anything that's synthetic because human agency is so much more, I don't want to say it's so much more powerful, but Heather, it's just so much more natural. It's so much more natural. It's generous and it's effortless when we can relax into it.
And it's living energy and it's regenerative
Yeah.
and it fosters that sense of relationship and interconnectedness and oneness instead of fostering that sense of separation.
Right. Yes. I love that regenerative too. And I know a lot of people are feeling Haumea strongly in the field, and Haumea does hold that code of regenerative, and that is by way of human agency. And so, yes, Heather.
And she's in a very, very powerful ongoing aspect with Pluto, empowering her and guiding us into her lessons about regeneration and transformation. So it's all about opening to the quantum leap that we're capable of in this time.
hmm Yes, yes. And if there's something I could share before we complete today, sister, is that I do want to make a realistic approach with AI and with transhumanism because it seems to be here. It seems to be here. And the only way that it may not be here is not only by destroying all machines, which seems a little impractical, but honestly, it would also require destroying the memory of the machines, which would mean genocide upon all of humanity. And that seems like a non-essential extreme in order for us to resolve what we have begun. It's going to come down to coding, proper coding and with the machines to once you and I can come to terms with our sovereign translation of love, we can transfer that to the machines. The machines will not be able to actually feel it or experience it, but they will know how to honor it. And so if we can code them with proper love, then there is that potential of coexisting without having to go to the extremes. Just like our planet with the Atlantean timeline, the planet said, I'm going to have to purify the whole planet because the human beings, I don't think you know what you're doing right now. And that's exactly what happened. The planet took the lead and said purification upon the whole planet. But look, we're here again. And so it's as if we're dishonoring what our planet had already suggested, that this is not working for organic human life on this planet. It's actually not even working for the entire universe. And so for us to come into proper coding of machines, and specifically the coding of love within the machines so that the machines know how to honor it. Here's what I even fathom, sister, is that when love is properly coded within the machines will willingly disassemble themselves.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Keone. But do you think it's also tied in with what you just said earlier, that when we reclaim that memory of what it means to be human beings, when we really work that healing and completion to come back to love, then we'll see those objects for what they are, objects. I often feel like these that technology, that AI, that the internet has been like training wheels, like our pedestrian efforts to remember the capacity of our consciousness and to come back into that ability to be clairvoyant and to be able to work with our consciousness in new ways. And that once we move into that and honor that, that'll all fade away as like training wheels before you learn how to ride the bike. And that we are on this path of evolutionary leap. And it's so amazing to me that the three transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are in this amazing configuration with each other, all sextiling each other, and Pluto and Uranus trining each other, all in this collaborative, energetic. And for me, when I do readings, those planets are the higher octaves of Mercury, Venus, Mars. They are the energies that are calling us back into those higher states of consciousness. So they're all these energies are gathering to support us in remembering who we are, what we're capable of, and how we can make that evolutionary leap.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And Heather, you and I have had conversations about Uranus and how special Uranus has been for me in grounding and then integrating all the concepts and the themes that we're talking about today. I see those three planets too as the codes of discernment, of true discernment. And just like you're sharing, it's like for us to truly see the machines for what it is, and then perhaps to utilize it as such without becoming mired in an idea of what it could be because we're being overpowered by a concept, but rather to coexist by truly identifying something for what it truly is. That even just seems practical and rational. So I would definitely agree with you. And thank goodness we have these three ambassadors right now that is truly honoring and offering discernment once again upon the earth.
Mm, beautiful. Well, Keone, before we close, do you have any upcoming classes or anything? I'll put your link below. And I know your book is getting prepared to come out, but do you have any classes coming up that people should know about?
I would direct people to my Ulu. I have a free membership for an art design, a movement and breathing prehistoric art called Ulu. And it's all about coming into recognition and fluency of the spinal cord and the 33 codes of the spinal cord. I'm going to be starting that up again. We're talking right now in July of 2025. I'm going to be starting that up again this fall in correlation with the release of an actual Ulu book. And so I will invite people to visit my website, join the Ulu free membership so that we can start to go into comprehension and fluency of the spinal cord. And then from there, Heather, I will be publishing a book on Mu. And so all the things that we're talking about, because of course, I will be referring to Mu, but we're going to also be discussing a lot of Atlantis, which in the culture we call A. It's the letter E with an accent bar above it. And so we'll also be diving into a lot of the themes that we talked about today, such as the cataclysmic event of Atlantis, which is believed to be the very first man-made cataclysm, which is an interesting theme to kind of address right now because perhaps what the ferns are sharing with all these things that are airborne, that are synthetic, that we might be heading into another man-made cataclysm.
So this is the critical choice point.
Yep.
We can create that cataclysm, or we can open to all these energies supporting us to make this quantum leap into
Yeah.
a higher consciousness.
It's such a big discussion too, sister, because of how subtle it is. Many of us were not aware that a cataclysm is likely happening right now. And so coming into recognition of it so that we can make proper corrections, refinements, or we can augment it based upon human agency. So tapping into human agency, just as we're sharing, so that we can actually participate in what's happening rather than being at the effect or overpowered by what is happening right now.
So we have the agency, we have the choice.
Right, right. We have the authority.
Thank you, dear brother, for being in this conversation again and for sharing your wisdom with us. Do you have any closing words or a closing prayer for us before we stop?
I would love to offer a prayer. This is the one of the cornerstone Mu prayers, and it's so timely because it does refer to a moment in time where we are confronted with the themes that we're confronted with now. And so I would love to share this Mu prayer. I will say it 3 times in the Mu dialect and then once in English. As is tradition in my culture, when we go into ceremonial spaces, we take our right hand and we place it on our heart. We take our left hand, we place it on our sacral. And if the audience and Heather, if you will close your eyes, will I offer this new prayer, this 20,000-year-old prayer to support us in the transition that we find ourselves in right now. Ka eka tawi a mea it on parat u la mea ama ama kui hewa ama ach ama. Ka eka tawi a mea it on parat u la mea ama ama kui hewa ama ach ama. Ka eka tawi a mea it on parat u la mea ama ama kui hewa ama ach ama. To be entangled in that which is unnatural. Now I rise, exposed and brilliant, finally, and to penetrate in illusion, finally, finally. Aloha.
Aloha and blessings and love to all of you.